something that I learned that I've done this for myself. I've discovered that entrepreneurs, I think really smart entrepreneurs do it too, is that they recognize that there has to be a part of them that does not change even in times of change. And because look, we're going to go through so many challenges and changes in our life and our career. When we go through change, when our lives or our work is disrupted, the reason I think that it often feels so scary is because we ourselves feel disrupted. We identify with the product of our work. We identify with the thing that we make. We identify with the thing that we do every day, with the role that we occupy. And so when that changes, we feel like our identity has changed too. I started, as I told you an hour ago, as a newspaper reporter. And when I realized I didn't want to be in newspapers anymore, it was actually kind of hard. It was hard to leave. I mean, I told you that job of quitting the first job, but I stayed, and then I got to this other job and I stayed for a couple of years longer, even as I freelanced on the side. And the idea of leaving that job actually became challenging, even though I loved being a newspaper reporter. The problem was I hated the job. It didn't pay me that well. The hours were terrible, but I stayed for too long because I thought of myself as a newspaper reporter. It's very, very hard to walk away from your identity.
Yeah.
And what I've realized that other people do incredibly well, either on an individual level or as a company, is that they come up with this thing about them that does not change in times of change. What is the value that they have? What is the mission that they serve that you can frame in a single sentence in a really short way? Like, well, imagine if you had to define yourself, but you can't use any words that relate to the things that you do every day, that are changeable. What does that mean? That's very abstract. So like this, I stopped thinking of myself as a newspaper reporter or a magazine editor or whatever. And I started to say this: I tell stories in my own voice. That's the sentence I use for myself. Now I wouldn't use that if somebody came up to me at a party and asked what I did, because that's obnoxious. Like, what does that mean? But for myself, I tell stories in my own voice. Stories, right? You zeroed in on it. That's what I'm good at. I recognize that. But it doesn't have to just be like magazine stories or podcast stories or books or whatever, right? Because any of that is changeable. I could get fired today from Entrepreneur, and then I don't have a magazine to work for anymore. I better not define myself as a magazine editor because it's too easily changeable, too disrupted. So instead, I tell stories. I can control that in my own voice, setting the terms for how I'm going to work. Right. I've reached a point in my career. I'm not going to get subsumed into an organization. I am only doing things because it is resting upon my abilities alone. That's what I'm interested in. So I talked to Gary Vaynerchuk about this. He said he has two words that guides everything that he does: practical optimism. Everything has to be filtered through practical optimism. I remember talking to the CEO of Foodsters. They make baking mixes and other things you find at Whole Foods. He says, we bring joy to people with upgraded sweet baked goods. Bring joy to people with upgraded sweet baked goods. Doesn't matter the product, doesn't matter the way, the delivery mechanism. We bring joy to people with upgraded. Right. The more in which we can define ourselves incredibly broadly and narrowly, but not anchor ourselves to the things that about us that are most changeable, our product, our role. That's where we're going to be liberated from feeling disrupted.